That was awesome. I was telling these guys earlier that I will always remember the first time that I ever heard them sing because it was my first Sunday here at First Christian Church Macomb. So I haven't necessarily, I've heard them sing in other places, but not back here at church for 2 years and 3 Sundays. But who's counting? It's been a wonderful 2 years and 3 Sundays, and it's just great to have you guys back in worship. Thank you so very, very much. Our scripture comes from Genesis. We continue our Genesis, if you will, our storyline with Jacob as we come to the 33rd chapter, verses 1 through 4. Let's listen as we hear the scripture this day. You can follow along in the bulletin if you'd like. Now Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the 2 maids. He put the maids with their children in front, then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on ahead of them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times, until he came near his brother. But Esau ran to meet him, and embraced him, and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. May God add blessing and understanding to the hearing of this word this day. Back in 1996, which was, just a few years ago, I was working in Louisville, Kentucky at a church known as Bear Grass Christian Church. And Ann had just graduated from Butler University and was moving to Louisville. We were engaged. We were going to be married later in that year. And a family came to me and said, "Kelly, would you like to live in our house so that you don't have 2 house payments? Would you be okay with that? We have a room. We can convert that." And I was like, yes, please. Free room, yes, please. And so I became a member of the Duff household. They were a great family, wonderful. You would have loved them. They are 3 kids. He was a doctor, she was a pharmacist, and just a wonderful family. And kind and gracious, as you can tell, because they opened their home to someone that they barely knew, because I just started at the church. So, I was there one day, on my day off, just kind of relaxing in my room, and I felt eyes. Have you ever had that? Have you ever felt eyes? Like I said, they had 3 kids. They had Madison, who was 4, they had Morgan, who was 3, and they had Max, who had just been born. And so I felt these eyes, and Madison and Morgan had been warned beyond belief that they should not ever come into my room. So when I felt the eyes, I looked, and in the doorway, not even an inch separating her from my room, but not in my room, stood Morgan. And she's had this look on her face, and I was like, "Are you sleepy, Morgan? Do you want to come in and lay down?" She came in, laid down on my bed, I had my arm underneath her. Oh, about 2 minutes later, I felt something very, very warm. It took about 10 seconds for it to kick in what had just happened. And Morgan was not sleepy, she was sick. And she had thrown up all over my arm, all over herself, all over the bedding. And I'm like, "Susan?" And Susan comes running in, and she's just super mom, and she's like, in a word, she takes care of everything. Even to the point of making sure that Max and Morgan are okay, and then she's like, "Are you okay? You're not going to puke now, are you?" I'm a youth minister, I have a strong stomach. And so she had a little dilemma. It was only a half day of daycare for Madison, and she needed to go pick Madison up, but she didn't want to leave a sick child and a baby with me, and she didn't want to take them. And I was like, "Well, I'll just go get Madison." She's like, "But they won't let you because it has to be, because we didn't arrange it sooner." And I was like, "Well, you tell me what you want to do. Just leave the kids with me." And she finally did. she got to pick up Madison, and on the way home, Susan is chuckling to herself about all of what has happened. And I think she thought that Morgan would find it funny too. And so she relayed the events of the morning. She was like, Morgan, you won't believe it. Or Madison, you won't believe it. Morgan was standing at Reverend Ingersoll, because that's what they call me. Have you ever heard a 4-year-old go, Reverend Ingersoll? It's so cute. Reverend Ingersoll's door, and he invited her in, and she laid down, and you know what? She puked all over him. And she thought that was going to be something funny. But in 4-year-old Madison's mind, she went, Morgan got to puke on Reverend Ingersoll? Like that was some kind of competition or privilege or something. When it comes to the scripture today, I kind of feel like that with Jacob. That he got to do something that probably wasn't a whole lot of fun, but he got to do it. He got to hang out with God in a significant way that we don't regularly get. We've been following this story from the beginning, and we remember that he has received a covenant. Jacob has received a covenant that was passed on to his father Isaac, that was given first to his father Abraham. And that promise is that you will have descendants that are so numerous, they will fill the land. And in this land I will give to you and your family. Also, by my presence with your family, you will be a blessing to all the families of the earth. A blessing that gets passed on generation after generation after generation after generation, and that blessing does not end now. And in fact, as part of the Judeo-Christian faith, part of that blessing is still ours. This blessing that God will be with and that God will bless others through us. It's still part of us. Jacob receives this blessing after, you might remember, having taken the birthright and having stolen the blessing from his brother Esau. He leaves home because his brother is so angry with him that he wants to kill him. And his parents want to protect him, so they send him on his way. And the first time he has an encounter with God is on his travels, laying down a dream, a vision, Jacob's ladder, you may remember it. And God comes and reminds him of this blessing and of this covenant that is now his, that God chooses to work through the younger son instead of the older son. He goes on to his Uncle Laban's house, and what we discussed last week in worship was those 14 years of working to get 2 wives, one of whom he loved and one who had pretty eyes. And so he now has Rachel and Leah. He has now 11 sons. He has worked for his uncle, and he's cheated him a little bit, and he's gotten wealthy off of his Uncle Laban. He's made his way now to where we pick up the scripture today, to his homeland. He was longing to go home. And he didn't know what awaited him. Because it had been 20 years now. 14 years working for his uncle for the wives. 6 more years working for his uncle to get wealthy, to get livestock, to get slaves. And now, he is on the doorstep. Just before where we picked up in the reading this morning, he has separated everything that he owns, separated it and parceled it out so that he could protect it, so that he could offer gifts to his brother. He takes his closest family members with him, and then he separates himself from them, and he's on the side of a creek bank, a river bank, and that night, he got to wrestle with God. And now we're not talking the kind of wrestling that we do. We're not talking about those kind of nights where you're sleepless because you're worried about your loved ones. We're not talking about those difficult moments when you're in arguments with your best friends or your spouse or your sibling. We're not talking about failing some type of test. We're not talking about those alone moments that just cause us so much That's what we call wrestling with God. But Jacob, actual physical competition on the side of that riverbank, wrestling with God. Jacob was so nasty that when his wrestling partner wanted to go away, he would let him. He held on, he held on. He even gets hit in the hip socket that will cause him to limp for the rest of his life, but he holds on. He holds on. And when in this wrestling, God says, let me go, he says, I will not. Give me a blessing. And God blesses again. Oh, if our wrestlings could end with blessing, wouldn't it be worth the competition? His wrestling continues the next day. He sends scouts to visit his brother. They've already been there. They come back and they say, your brother's coming out to meet you, and he's bringing 400 men. Well, does that sound like fun? That sounds like a little bit more wrestling to me. After 20 years of separation and a brother who was so mad he wanted to kill you, he's coming out to greet you with 400 men. He sends livestock as a gift. He sends more livestock as a gift. He sends more gifts, and they greet his brother as he keeps coming to meet. Esau keeps coming to Jacob, and with each step, there's another gift, there's another gift. And finally, Jacob jumps in front of all of his family, bows 7 times, and greets his brother. Esau says, what is with all this stuff? And Jacob says, it's for you. I think it's a peace offering. He says, it's all for you. I've come home and I wanted you to know I want things to be good with us. So I give you these gifts. And Esau says, you're my brother. Stand up, hug me, kiss me. Let me tell you that I love you. Let me kiss you. Let me tell you that you're forgiven. All of this that you've given me, I don't need it. I'm glad you're home. Come and be home, my brother. And Jacob says, no, keep it. And then he introduces his family, a family he didn't have before. And Esau finally says, you know what, this is so wonderful, let's just go. Let me march beside you, let me keep you safe. I have these 400 men. And we'll make our home. And Jacob says, you know what, I'm kind of used to being on my own. We're going to be close, but I'm going to live over here. And thus, the story of Jacob and Esau comes to a close. There's still some good stuff to happen. A child is still to be born. These 12 sons are going to have significant influence in the life and history of the Jewish faith, and then, of course, in our own faith. But this is where we're going to stop the story. Jacob's home. Forgiveness and love abound. Now we have homes. We have homes. But if forgiveness and love are not bountiful, then really they're just houses. If in our homes we're always trying to one-up our brother or our sister or our spouse, if we're trying to get the better of another, if all we're worried about is that inheritance, then we're not home. Khalil Gibran writes this about homes and houses. We'll see if I can do this with a microphone like this. And tell me, people of Orphalese, this is a town that the prophet has come to discuss many different things, and the people are asking the prophet, tell us about this, and tell us about this, and a carpenter says, tell us about houses. And tell me, says the prophet, people of Orphalese, what have you in your houses, and what is it you guard with fastened doors? Have you peace, the quiet urge that reveals your power? Have you remembrances, the glimmering arches that span the summits of the mind? Have you beauty that leads the heart from things fashioned of wood and stone to the holy mountain? Tell me, have you these in your houses? Or have you only comfort and the lust for comfort, that stealthy thing that enters the house a guest and then becomes a host and then a master? Aye, and it becomes a tamer, and with hook and scourge makes puppets of your larger desires. Though its hands are silken, its heart is of iron. It lulls you to sleep, only to stand by your bed and jeer at the dignity of the flesh. It makes mock of your sound senses and lays them in the thistledown like fragile vessels. Verily, the lust for comfort murders the passion of the soul and then walks grinning in the funeral. But you, children of space, you restless in rest, you shall not be trapped nor tamed. Your house shall be not an anchor, but a mast. And then he continues to go on to talk about how it is that the house that is built for us is not of this world, but above, where love and grace and faith and forgiveness are bountiful. Do you want a house? Or do you want a home? Do you want comfort? Or do you want the ideal? It seems like the ideal is so far out there, but it doesn't have to be. A young woman named Aisha Patterson has written this: home is the place where your heart resides. Home is the place that you decide. Home is the womb that holds the soul. Home is the place where one is whole. Home is the glow you hold in your eye. Home is the emotion that makes you cry. Home is safe and a place of peace. Home is where all strivings cease. Home is all these wonderful things. Home is the place where you develop wings. Home is the place you'll find one day. Home is the place where your heart will stay. I believe that's possible for all of us. But only in faith. And I think that as people of faith, we have to widen the definition of home. Home can't just be the place where we end our day. Home has got to be where we are, no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing. That has got to become our home because, my friends, have you seen the news? 3 hours south of here, people don't know home. They have no peace. A senseless shooting. We don't understand all of the facts. I'm not trying to make a judgment. But a young man is dead and a community is in turmoil. And what do we do with that? That is part of our home. The news about what's happening in Israel and in Palestine, a place where so many of these stories that we love and talk about actually took place. Holy sites for the 3 of the world's major religions. And we ask ourselves, what can be done there? I think we have to begin to include that as part of home for us. Iraq, the Ukraine, faithful people. we see beyond the four walls where we end our day. If we're truly faithful people, we see beyond this place we call home here in Macomb. Someone asks you, where are you from? Where's your home? Macomb. But I wonder if the answer should be bigger. I've seen this. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I saw it for the first time at a General Assembly of the Christian Church. There are these wonderful booths, and there are all these wonderful places to see things and to get free stuff and to look, and I saw this flag. This flag, it was blue, and in the middle of the flag was a picture, and that picture was our planet. And right underneath the planet, you know what it said? Home. The world is our home. As people of faith, let us not be overwhelmed. Let us do what we can every day to be welcoming and kind and gracious and forgiving and loving, as God is kind and welcoming and gracious and forgiving and loving to us. If we can do that here in Macomb, we can make a difference. And who knows how far that difference can stretch. Do not be overwhelmed, but be strident and be encouraged. For wherever you are, whatever you are doing in faith, you're home. Welcome. May it be so.